1969 of a political action started by the Black student movement and the cafeteria workers. This was the famous cafeteria workers strike, which was coincident with the Vietnam War, coincident with the aftermath of the civil rights era. And on Monday night at 7 o'clock, there's going to be the showing of a documentary called Women Behind the Lines. And it's a documentary about what happened in 1969. It should be a really important event for you to engage with because it's recent history. As Missy was talking about Howard Lee, think about it, the very first black mayor of a primarily white southern town is still alive and doing very well. The very first black woman to come to UNC as an undergraduate came in 1962. And I always like to say that 2-3 years ago, I ran into her in line at Trader Joe's. And I was in Trader Joe's and I was looking, I said, "Why do I know you?" And it's because she was the first black female undergraduate to come to UNC. And she was healthy, happy, and buying whatever one buys at Trader Joe's. And I was thinking, usually when we teach history, think about Hinton James, the first student to come to UNC in 1795. I'm not going to run into him at Trader Joe's. But I am going to run into the first 3 black undergraduate students to come to UNC, who are pictured over there. All came back to campus for the very first time 2 years ago. They came back as a group, but they had not been back here since 1957 as a group. And we'll talk about that on the tour. But a lot of the black history of this campus is so recent. In fact, I was teaching a class on Black Chapel Hill a couple years ago, and I had the first black woman swimmer ever in the history of UNC. So history was being made in the 21st century in terms of race. So I think that's a really important thing for you all to remember, right? This is not ancient history, but where I'm going to start the tour is at the Unsung Founders Monument. And that has gotten a lot of press. It has gotten a lot of discussion very recently with the Real Silent Sam Coalition. You might have seen their reenactment of that monument in the pit. But one of my research points is why in the 21st century did we remember the history of slavery on this campus? Well, and you'll see we didn't actually, because it doesn't mention slavery on the monument. It doesn't mention black people either. But why don't we remember something where we can bring the people who participated back? Right? That, to me, is an interesting phenomenon, and it's one that we'll find all over the United States. We were just talking about a brand new book called Ebony and Ivy, which, if you haven't seen, I would recommend. It's a book about the relationship between the beginnings of universities in the United States and the institution of slavery. There's also a lot of information about Native American slavery and the role of educating Indians. In the 21st century, there has been a major growth in the study of universities and slavery. Brown University, 2 weekends ago, erected a monument, a memorial to the university's relationship with the transatlantic slave trade. So that was in 2014. 2 years ago at Emory University, there was a conference called Slavery in Universities. And there were representatives from Harvard and Yale, from Princeton, from the University of Texas, the University of Mississippi. And there was huge interest. There were huge numbers of participants. There were lots and lots of papers about the fact that in the 21st century, dozens of universities have started to remember their past with slavery. But their past with more recent events is a little more problematic.